else it might as well be us.
Now, isn't it true? Do you think that we're a Christian nation? Because I'll tell you that isn't the beginning, like our founding fathers were more in the area of Masons or even atheists, or, right?
Well, atheists or whatever, yeah. I think that there were probably a mixture. I think that some of the people coming over here were running from the Catholic Church and wanted to be Christians in their own particular way, and so they wanted to follow the Protestant view. And I think some of the politicians that came over here used that. So yes, there were some Christians who came over and did some great things in the founding of the country, but there were Freemasons who also were very important in the founding of this country and setting up the laws and regulations. There were those people who were, I suppose we would call them humanists, who also were very instrumental in helping to form the Constitution and the actual bylaws of the country. So,
Universalists, Unitarians, Quakers,
Deists. What would you say to a Christian person that is more or less closed to any other thinking than what he has been conditioned to or studied all his life, studied the Bible as he knows it, his parents know it? What would you say to them in regards to this information?
It would depend. If you're talking to 57 such people, you could probably appeal reasonably to about 6 of them, and the rest would be pretty much a lost cause. Once the mind is committed to any sort of programmed philosophy, it's very hard to open up a crack and get through there with facts or truth of any kind.
Sure.
Bystanders, if you could find any unbiased bystanders, might marvel at the density, the ignorance of the person you're trying to enlighten, and they might also do you the compliment of saying, what a wise and well-informed fellow this is. Why can't he convince the dummy? But the fact is, he can't. The human mind changes very slowly, except in extremely rare and dramatic situations. If you could change people's attitudes, and let's assume for the better, very quickly, the process of psychiatric analysis would take one afternoon. In fact, it may take many years.
Right.
And it's two intelligent people talking to each other, but the person that needs help may require many years to get straight.
Sure, because after all, if there is hidden agenda here, politically and economically based, then how many centuries has it taken to take hold in the world as it is today, if that's absolutely true?
One thing to suggest to the true believer, to use that term, capital T, capital B, is to dispose him toward at least being impartial about science. Science really deals with knowledge. Individual scientists make errors, and as we look at the history of science, we see they too incorporated some now recognized as absurd beliefs at different points in the past. But those were the exceptions. By and large, it was a mighty river whose only purpose, whose only function was to find truth, whether the truth about this cup or that light or the sun, whatever it might be. And no scientist ever thought, I know what I'll do. I'll get into science and I'll do a lot of harm. That's not how it works.
Right.
You're fascinated by looking at a leaf in the sun, and that leads you into the science. So we now, I think, are more inclined to respect science than, we know this, we're more inclined to respect science today than ever in the past. And once you can get somebody to take an unbiased attitude towards science, even as an abstraction, then you can say, good, now let me grab you by the lapels and bring something else to your attention. For centuries, the churches, organized religion, have opposed science bitterly. Not all members of the Methodist Church or the Catholic Church or the Jewish faith or whatever. Some of them were in fact scientists. But as a large generality, it is simply true. It is simply the case. And this is well documented, of the opposition. This is well documented in an important book that everyone really should read. Whether you're an atheist or believer, whatever you are, you should know this book. The History of the Warfare Between Science and Theology. That's one of the titles. Or Between Science and Religion. Unless you've become familiar with the information in that book, you really don't know what the hell we're talking about here today, to be very blunt.
Right, exactly. And I want to reiterate at this time that this show, hopefully, and I know that all of us have that viewpoint, that we're after the truth. Yes. We're after that. We're not after debarring or debasing anything at all, any organization, but simply to bring out the truth, which I need to make a statement here. In regards to science versus religion, And I would say that maybe astrology, which is, I think in the mainstream, somewhat controversial on its validity, but I just recently came from San Francisco and just went to Washington Square. I was walking the street, and I came upon St. Peter and St. Paul Church. I looked up on the church, and in marble, carved in there, were zodiac signs. Where the winged phoenix, the winged cow, which are the fixed signs, a main component in the research of astrology, which showed me that there had to be a basis from long ago, because I think that church was made like in 1890 or 1900.
A basis for what?
Basis that sciences like astrology.
It is not a science, but proceed.
Okay.
It's a discipline of its own sort.
I would think so, and I think that in some minds it is based on science because it has to deal with the calculations of the planets and various, but there's various schools and thinkings on that.
Sure.
Anyway, my point is that I think that the religion is saying that astrology is no good at all, no validity, and yet it's on their church right there. And I thought that was fascinating.
Well, in astrology, it actually started off as just astronomy, which is a science, and consequently there is an order to the universe, and we've learned much about that. And of course, like Steve said, it's probably more of a discipline in the science, astrology, but nonetheless, again, you're right. It shows the imprint of an ancient system on something that we are given to understand is a new, relatively new understanding for the past 2,000 years of Christianity, which in fact, this is something that's close to my heart and my work, is showing how modern day Christianity is in point of fact based on ancient astrology and astrological calculations. The very concept that the Messiah is referred to as God's Son, and he has 12 helpers. Of the 12 helpers, we can go back into reference works, Christian reference works, and see that some of the early church fathers said the only reason why there would be 4 gospels because there were only 4 seasons, and consequently the entire concept of Christianity was based on astrology. Whether it's a science and that's irrelevant, but the point is the church has hidden these things from the people. But I am here to assure you that there are very powerful people in the world, in the Vatican, in government, that know these things, but we, the people, are not privileged. And of course, this has always been the case.
So they're keeping that information from us?
I think purposely.
Now, you have, in the book, I believe you brought out a particular thing, subject in regards to the sun. And in German, it was S-O-N, and the sun, S-U-N. Could you tell us about that?
Well, it's just that what I was trying to say is that according to the ancient way of thinking about the cosmology of the world, they realized, all the ancient peoples realized that no one's ever seen God, and perhaps no one's ever going to see God. So what we can deduce about God or Creator is from the things made. So consequently, the sun became the most important thing God has ever made, so to speak.
And you have a graphic in there that, could we see that graphic there with the people raising their hands?
Yes, raising their hands. And this is, of course, the point I was making in the book, is that when the raising of the hands, this was done back in Sumerian times, Babylonian, Phoenician, Canaanite. The Hittites, we have pictures of them. And of course, in Egypt, it's all over Egypt with the people raising their hands. Well, what's interesting is that the Hindus, of course, and Buddhists, etc. But today we have Christians all over the world. When we see on television, Christian TV, you're talking about worshiping God's Son, and Christians are raising their hand in the same symbolism as the ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Sumerians. The more we change, the more we stay the same. And in relation to what Steve was saying about the mind, I like the concept that the brain is like a parachute. It doesn't work very well if it's not open.
When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order.
This is the end for you, my master.